Welcome back to Movies You Missed Podcast, everybody. This is episode 154. Today we are here to discuss two epic comedies starring the fantastic Sandra Bullock. I'm excited about this episode because both of these movies are very entertaining. I think I like your pick, V, over mine just a little bit more, but I do very much enjoy my pick. It's a great movie. There's a lot of laughs, and both films have fantastic casts that bring laughs throughout the entire movie. There's not a dull moment in either of these movies.
There really isn't, and I'm excited to talk about your pick today because it is going to be the first Sandra Bullock movie you've ever discussed on the show.
Which is crazy to think about because I like every one that you've chosen, at least.
Yeah, I've chosen several. Actually, this will be my fifth Sandra Bullock movie so far on the podcast.
That is crazy, and I'm a little shocked that I didn't pick While You Were Sleeping. Practical Magic is not something that I normally gravitate to unless my wife wants to watch it around October. And she's just got a whole handful of other great movies out there. Even some of her dramatic work is awesome. So I'm excited to get into her career because I know, V, you like to break down a lot of the filmography of the cast of the films that you choose. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to being reminded of some movies that I might have missed or just, have fallen under the radar. And you know what? Hey, that's what we do here at Movies You Missed Podcast. We discuss movies that have fallen under the radar, that we might have missed, that we might have forgotten about, and we just want to reintroduce you as an audience and V and myself to these films. We also don't spoil anything here, and V and I are film industry veterans. We have been friends for over 27 years and spent collectively over 25 years in the entertainment industry in various capacities. And I think now it's time to get into the movies that we saw in theaters or on streaming over the last week. V, what do you say?
I think that's a great idea.
Awesome. What did you see?
I actually didn't see any movies this week, unfortunately. I was traveling a little bit, but I know you saw one.
I did, V. I went to the movies yesterday after I got back from my trip. I originally wanted to go see Black Bag, but the app on Regal had the incorrect time for the movie. So unfortunately, I was not able to see it, but I was already at the movie theater, and there was one movie starting right at the time that I got to the movie theater, and that movie was the new live-action version of Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This movie is a pile of absolute dog horse shit. This movie fucking sucks so bad.
Duh.
It takes Presence as the worst movie of the year. Presence is still number 2. That Steven Soderbergh trash that I went and saw with Lucy Liu. Snow White is completely devoid of anything. Of any kind of merit, of any kind of comedy, music, visual effects.
Substance.
Anything. This movie fucking sucks.
Dude,
I fell asleep 2 times. Yeah, to the surprise of no one, I'm sure, at this point. This movie is absolutely atrocious. It is such an insulting movie that I don't know how any executive, even the director Mark Webb, sat down and screened this movie and said, nailed it. I sat there just like completely dumbfounded at how absolutely horrible this movie is. The dwarves are fucking terrible. Gal Gadot has a song, and holy shit, can she definitely not sing. I am so mad. And I knew it was going to be bad, but I kind of went in with a little bit of open-mindedness, thinking like, maybe there'll be a good song. Oh, hell no.
Well, we knew she couldn't sing from that awful, cringeworthy Imagine video that came out at the beginning of the pandemic.
Imagine? I don't even know what that is.
Remember when she got all of the movie stars to sing Imagine by John Lennon on video for COVID, and it was at the beginning of the lockdown, and it was the most out-of-touch, horrific video any of us had ever seen.
I never saw it.
I promise
honestly,
you,
this is news
the people
to me.
who have seen it remember it.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Bad. I'm going to have to look it up on YouTube.
Oh, and she's a terrible actress. I'm not shocked by any of what you've just said.
Man, no. Avoid it. Do not bring your kids. Do not bring yourself. Do not give this movie any money. Let it die and let it go away. So that's what I saw in theaters this last week.
Great advice. Oh, my God. Oh, man. The funny thing is that in the future, when you say that I have to watch a terrible movie because I owe you for that, like we did with Aquaman and... You can't use that because we all knew it was terrible by Tuesday.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
I mean, we knew it was terrible before it even came out, but it was confirmed over the weekend.
It is so bad.
All right, well, to make up for that horrific experience And I would love to discuss the fact that we have a new written review from one of our fans or one of our new listeners on Apple
sweet.
Podcasts. And I'd like to give a shout out to Elkhorn Kate, who is actually my high school math teacher, one of my all-time favorite teachers. She writes, "Glad I found you. We like to watch movies but have trouble finding good ones. I listened to the What a Pair episode and chose Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's not as funny as Sergeant Bilko." Ooh, John.
All right. Well, I haven't seen Sergeant Bilko, so I don't know.
Now we have to, and we got to
Yeah, I
compare.
know.
But the ending was great. It's a great show, great hosts, good voices, and good chemistry. So thank you so much to Elkhorn Kate. Really appreciate your written review and the fact that not only are you a new listener, but you've been really active on social media, commenting on our posts and sharing our posts as well. So thank you so much for all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Thank you very much for that. That's
yeah,
great.
we hope you continue listening.
I hope so. All right, V, it's time to go undercover. What do you say? Are you ready?
She's beauty and she's grace. She's Miss United States. Yes, I am totally ready.
All right, let's do it.
All
If
right.
that wasn't a hint enough.
I hope it was for most of you, because I hope most of you all are big fans of this movie, just like John and I, because I picked the 2000 classic comedy starring Sandra Bullock, Michael Caine, and Benjamin Bratt. This is Miss Congeniality.
I can't believe this movie is 25 years old.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that because I remember when it came out.
So do I. I saw it in theaters.
So, I don't think I saw it in theaters, but I do remember when it came out, and my family owned it soon afterwards. I've been watching it ever since.
My family also got this movie on DVD right after it came out. We just could not get enough of this movie.
All right, so let's dive into what Miss Congeniality is all about. We are introduced to Grace Hart. She's an agent with the FBI, and she's a bit of a loner, but more importantly for this character and this movie, she's very frumpy.
She is, very much so. The hair, the sunglasses.
She's a mess.
It's all, yeah. She's a bit of a mess, yeah.
She really
And
is.
it's really difficult to make Sandra Bullock not look attractive.
It really is, but I actually think they did it really well, and I love the fact that they didn't just automatically choose glasses and go, ta-da, now she's ugly.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But
like they did with Rachel A. Cook and She's All That.
precisely, and because it's you and I who both wear glasses,
Yeah.
I hate that trope.
I am also not a fan of that trope.
Clark
It's
Kent was hot in
probably
his
why I
glasses.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not a big Superman fan, so I don't really care. But I get what you're saying.
And like her character in The Heat, she doesn't have a lot of friends. She certainly doesn't have a lot of colleagues at work who would enjoy working with her. So she's a loner, and she also doesn't really listen to her superiors. and the agent in charge in this movie is named McDonald. He's played wonderfully by Ernie Hudson, who stars in the Ghostbusters movies,
Yes.
which I covered the first one in episode 135.
Wow, that was almost exactly 20 episodes ago.
That's true, it almost was. And because she doesn't follow his orders during a sting operation actually, there's an agent who gets shot. He's going to be fine, which is great. But she gets in a lot of trouble because of this, and so McDonald puts her on a desk. While she's out of the field, she starts studying the most recent letter that has come from a bomber, similar to the Unabomber, right?
Yes.
And while she's studying this letter that is full of a lot of clues, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he does put a lot of hints in his letters. The most recent one has come, she's researching it, and through that she realizes that he's actually threatening the Miss United States pageant that's coming up. She goes to the boss, who agrees with her, and through that, he actually creates a team and picks her colleague and friend, basically her only friend, Agent Eric Matthews, played by Benjamin Bratt, to run the team. But as they start to assemble this team and dive into the Miss United States pageant, they realize that most of their agents won't be able to go behind the scenes. They won't be able to be on the bus, in the hotel, backstage of this pageant. So what they really need to do is put an agent undercover who will be a participant in the Miss United States pageant.
And I love the montage of how they try to figure out who could actually go undercover. It's so hilarious.
Yes, because the first woman they choose, Eric suggests this beautiful agent, but unfortunately she's on maternity leave. So they go through the whole list of which women in the FBI could possibly pull off a swimsuit, because there's the swimsuit competition in this Miss United States pageant. And they finally center on Agent Grace Hart.
Yes.
Because under all that frumpiness, it's Sandra Bullock. Of course she can pull this off.
Oh, yeah. I love that scene, too, when they finally put her in the dress in that computer program. She's like, guys, that's enough. That's enough. And Benjamin Bratt's like, well, wait a minute. This could totally work. She goes, haha, very funny. You've had your fun.
So she begrudgingly agrees to go undercover. And that's really just because she's gotten in trouble recently and she's trying to get back into her boss's good graces. So she agrees, and her and Eric go to the hosts of the Miss United States pageant to discuss their plan. This is where we're introduced to Kathy Morningside, played by Candice Bergen.
Yes. Murphy Brown.
Murphy Brown, yep, exactly. Oh, and she's also, the only other credit I wanted to talk about hers is she plays Patrick Dempsey's mother in Sweet Home Alabama, another rom-com.
Oh.
I love her in that movie too. Her co-host is played by William Shatner. He plays Stan Fields, which is really funny because in order to honor William Shatner's Canadian heritage, they picked the name Stan Fields because Stan Fields is a brand of Canadian long underwear.
Oh, wow.
And William Shatner, I mean, he's Captain Kirk, right? We don't need to talk anymore about his credits. He actually wasn't a former pick of mine because I picked Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan for episode 126.
Yes.
And he and Candice Bergen also starred in a TV show, Boston Legal, for a lot of years.
Oh, I remember when that show was on. I never watched it, but I remember when that was on.
Yeah, so they reunited for that show, which is cool.
Very cool.
So now we have Kathy Morningside and Stan Fields talking to these agents about putting someone undercover. And they are flabbergasted that the FBI is actually suggesting Grace Hart to go undercover because she doesn't look great. And so what Kathy does is suggest that they go to a consultant by the name of Victor Melling because he'll help them whip Grace into shape and hopefully get her presentable enough to go undercover and be believable. They meet Victor at a restaurant and the first thing he says is,
"If you are Grace Hart, I quit here and now."
Because it's true, she really does a good job of looking horrible, and and when they leave the restaurant, there's actually a reference to your favorite movie of all time.
Yes.
Oh my God. I haven't seen a walk like that since Jurassic Park.
And as someone who had their walk made fun of throughout high school, I really resonated with this character. And
Oh, did you really have your walk made fun of? Interesting.
Oh, all the time, yeah.
I just had somebody at the bar that I work at tell me that they thought that I kind of walked like a penguin and had asked all the other people at the restaurant if I walked like a penguin.
Oh,
and
no.
I asked a friend of mine about it, and she said, "No, you don't walk like a penguin, but I walk like a man." And I was like, "You don't walk like a man." It's so interesting thinking about walks, like I just walk. Like I'm not trying to do anything with it. I'm just getting there,
like
getting from A to B.
Talk like a man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, though. I didn't take offense to it or anything like that. And nobody's ever made fun of my walk in the past. And I don't think that she was making fun of it. She was like, "You just kind of have this penguin walk to you." And I'm like, "Well, I like penguins, so that's cool, I guess. I'll get a penguin tattoo now."
Yep, and rewatching this movie, and it's the first time I've seen it in a handful of years, I was just reminded that when in my early 20s, well, actually up to now, I am Grace Hart. I am not well put together most days at all. I need a consultant like Victor.
I wouldn't mind a consultant either.
Well, there you go. You know what? When this podcast goes big, we can both hire consultants.
Perfect. And I hope that it's who plays this consultant in Miss Congeniality.
I hope so, too, because the man who plays Victor Melling is Michael Caine. We've talked about him a lot on this podcast. Well, and you'll talk about him more because you'll cover more Christopher Nolan movies. So far, he's been in Tenet, Interstellar, Children of Men, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yes.
And he's also in the original Alfie and the original Italian Job. And we're big fans of Michael Caine here.
We most certainly are.
Okay, so now we have this team. We have the agents from the FBI. Kathy Morningside and Stan Fields are in on it. And now we have Victor Melling helping out as well. And now comes the makeover montage.
Oh, yeah.
This was
good times.
So great. And then we have the entrance of the real Sandra Bullock, the gorgeous Sandra Bullock. And I love this sequence when she walks out of the airport hangar to Mustang Sally. Oh, it's so good. And so for the rest of the movie, we have Sandra Bullock as Gracie Lou Freebush, because that's her new name, going undercover for the Miss United States pageant as Miss New Jersey, because unfortunately, they found some dirt on the original Miss New Jersey. And so she's unfortunately had to drop out of the contest because of it.
I'm confused. What state is she going to be from? All the winners have already been chosen.
Don't worry about that, Mr. Fields. We recently discovered some information about the winner from New Jersey.
And a performance in a little film called Armageddon On.
Was that her?
Another former pick of yours. I mean, Armageddon, not Armageddon On.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember doing Armageddon on, but I remember Armageddon.
Yes, my apologies. Glad I did that bit of clarification. Oh my god.
Oh, yeah, all good.
And so now we are treated to hilarious comedy, a fish out of water story, and we really get to have some insight and some character growth on Gracie Hart's part. And there are just so many great scenes and one-liners because this pageant, actually what they call a scholarship program, is taking place in Texas. And at one point they're looking for this domestic terrorist. Gracie's on stage and she sees a man with a gun in the audience, so she goes to tackle him, and Kathy Morningside has to remind her that it's Texas.
Look, he had a gun.
Of course he had a gun. This is Texas. Everybody has a gun. My florist has a gun.
I don't have a gun. My ancestors were Quakers.
I don't have a gun. My ancestors were Quakers. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's so simple and so small, but it's so hysterical.
Just the way William Shatner delivers it. It's so perfect.
Yes, it is.
And we have some really...
Good old Shatner.
Good old Shatner. And we have some really good chemistry and dynamics, not only between Candice Bergen and William Shatner, but also between Benjamin Bratt and Sandra Bullock, because this is actually not the first movie they'd been in together. They were... They co-starred in Demolition Man.
Oh.
It's a guilty pleasure action movie of mine starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes.
Which is on your list for the future, I believe, because I have not seen that one.
Oh yeah, part of our guilty pleasure movie series for sure. Benjamin Bratt has also appeared on our podcast a couple times before because he was in Clear and Present Danger, a pick of mine from our very first year. And he plays Ernesto de la Cruz in Coco, a pick of yours.
Yeah.
Poor Benjamin was also in Catwoman, the Halle Berry movie.
Oh my gosh, was he really? That's hilarious.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Poor guy. But he's also appeared in some great movies, including Traffic and the first Doctor Strange.
I completely forgot about Benjamin Bratt and Traffic. I love Traffic. That is on my future list as well.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I have not revisited it since the early 2000s when it came out.
Oh, well, wonderful.
And I like how this movie makes a lot of hilarious moments out of the pageant without outright mocking it the whole time. And so these other contestants are real women. You start to build empathy for them as well. And you really don't want some domestic terrorists attacking this pageant after meeting them and learning more about them. And it's Sandra Bullock. She really carries this movie so well. And God, she has so many great one-liners because she's such a fish out of water. During the swimsuit portion, when she's complaining about being in this swimsuit, because like we said at the beginning of this movie, she's very frumpy, and so when she's in the swimsuit, you know, she's really upset and says, the last time I was this naked in public, I was coming out of a uterus. And we're a little early with this episode, about a month early actually, because there is a classic line in this film, and it has to do with your idea of a perfect date.
Yeah.
Describe your perfect date.
It's a tough one. I'd have to say April 25th, because it's not too hot, not too cold. All you need is a light jacket.
I still quote that every year when this April 25th comes around.
One of the more quotable lines from Miss Congeniality, for sure.
And the way they came up with the answer to what is your idea of a perfect date is because that answer was actually an answer in a real-life beauty pageant at some point.
What?
Oh, poor girl on stage just completely had a brain freeze. And that's what she said.
That is very... Oh, wow. I like that a lot.
Thankfully, you and I don't record this podcast live.
Very, yeah.
Case in point. I clearly love this movie. I've loved it for 25 years. I'm stoked to pick it for its 25th anniversary year. So, John, what did you think about this week's rewatch?
I've always had a good time watching Miss Congeniality, not because of my crush on Sandra Bullock, but the comedy that comes along with this movie. I think it's very, very sharp, very snappy. Everybody, even supporting cast, is awesome. I like the back and forth between Benjamin Bratt and Sandra Bullock throughout the first at least 20 minutes of the movie, and even kind of just continuing on. Their friendship grows, and you can see that there's a lot of mutual respect between each other, which I like to see, especially in a movie like this. Michael Caine, excellent. Of course, William Shatner's fantastic, as is Candice Bergen. Heather Burns cracks me up. She's Cheryl, the Miss Rhode Island in this movie. She's the one that delivers the famous perfect date line. And she, if you don't know her by name, she was in You've Got Mail, and she's adorable. I wish she were showing up in more things. I watched this movie a lot more when it first came out on DVD, and as I've gotten older, I don't rewatch it as often as I feel like I should, but my wife and I put it on, I want want to say about 4 or 5 months ago. One day I was scrolling through one of the streamers, because I unfortunately don't own this one. I've always borrowed it from my parents. And I pushed play on it, and I think I texted you, V. I was like, I'm 20 minutes into Miss Congeniality, and I'm fucking crying. This movie is hysterical. I had forgotten how funny it was. It's always one of those movies that I go back to when people are like, have you seen this? Are you a Sandra Bullock fan? Miss Congeniality is that, and While You Were Sleeping are the two big ones for me. So it was a great revisit, especially for the podcast, even though I did watch it not too long ago. So, of course, when I put it on, my wife said, didn't you just watch this? Well, we just did about 4 or 5 months ago.
That's
and,
not just watching it. Half a year ago
I know,
is
it's not.
If it was 2 weeks, maybe you could say that?
Yes, right. Or yesterday.
Or yesterday.
But yeah, my wife likes to throw that out all the time. Didn't you just watch this? I watched it 6 months ago to a year ago. She goes, no, you just watched it. Okay, fine. Yeah, I just watched it. Anyway, big fan of Miss Congeniality. Very glad to revisit it for the podcast. It should be in my DVD collection. I'm not sure why it's not, but it'll have to make its way in there at some point in the future.
I really hope it does, and I'm glad you're a fan.
And I really like Steve Monroe. He plays Candace Bergen's assistant. He's hysterical. And another thing about this movie that I've always enjoyed is the fact that it's a beauty pageant, and there are just some gorgeous women in this movie.
Of course you said that, especially because it came out when you were a teenager.
That's true.
And I think one of the reasons why Sandra Bullock was so believable as Grace Hart in this movie is because she is a little bit klutzy in real life. When this movie premiered and she was getting out of her car for the movie at the red carpet, she tripped and fell.
No.
Yeah. And the scene when she comes home at the beginning of the movie after that sting operation at that Russian restaurant, the script only stated Gracie comes home and starts boxing because she's upset from her bad day at work. The rest of the scene with her tripping and kicking the bed and being really pissed and then the microwave oven not working, that was all ad-libbed by Sandra Bullock.
Awesome.
I love that scene so much. And then the next morning when she goes to get coffee, all the people working in that Starbucks were just the actual Starbucks employees. And they took it over to film it. Oh,
cool.
Which is great.
That's pretty neat. I like that.
And as I said, a lot of this movie takes place in Texas. One of the pageant scenes is at the Alamo. And during this pageant sequence, there's a band on the stage that plays in between all the contestants coming on and off. And the bass guitar player in that band was Robert Rodriguez.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, he lives in Austin and heard they were filming and he came on set and he had a little cameo.
That is awesome.
Yes.
I had no idea. I'm going to have to look for him next time I watch the movie.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And there's a scene where all of the contestants have to be on stage and do a dance together, and that really opens the show. And Sandra Bullock purposely didn't rehearse with all of the other actresses, so she could be out of step. So it looked like she didn't know what the hell she was doing with the choreography.
Awesome.
I love that scene so much. It's so cute. She's turning around.
Practicality.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is that Gracie Hart, playing Gracie Lou Freebush in this movie, Sandra Bullock, I love this mix of she's very beautiful, but she also is very active. She also takes care of herself. She also is a badass FBI agent. She beats up a lot of people in this movie. It's very enjoyable to watch.
For sure.
And she and Benjamin Bratt do several scenes, including in the beginning of the movie when he's trying to convince her to join his team and go undercover. And she's like, what? Does that mean I have to wear a dress? I have to wear a swimsuit? No way. There's no way. And he's like, come on, Gracie. You're my best friend and you got to help me out on this. I'm leading this team for the very first time. And of course, just like two very active people would do who are FBI agents, they beat the crap out of each other in the gym. It's a wrestling match, basically. A lot of self-defense tactics in order to see who is going to agree to this. And Sandra Bullock and Benjamin Bratt did all of their own fighting throughout this movie.
Oh, very cool.
Stunt doubles were brought in, and they made sure that each actor was using the proper form during this, but they really wanted to do it together so they could have those close-up shots so they could seem like authentic FBI agents, and they did, and it was really fantastic. I'm so glad they did that.
That's really badass. I had no idea.
So that is Miss Congeniality, one of my all-time favorite rom-coms and comedies, and definitely one of my all-time favorite Sandra Bullock movies. I'm so glad to be able to talk about it on this podcast. And it was written by Mark Lawrence, and he wrote Noelle.
That's right, he did.
One of your previous picks for Christmas. He also wrote music and lyrics, a Hugh Grant and Drew Barrymore movie. He also wrote 2 Weeks Notice, another Sandra Bullock movie.
With Hugh Grant?
With Hugh Grant in it, yeah, that's right. And he also wrote Forces of Nature, a Sandra Bullock rom-com with Ben Affleck.
Oh, wow. Oh, gosh. I think I saw that one time.
Right when it came out. That's when I saw it.
Yeah, I saw it I think it was either a rental or on HBO or something. I didn't like that one very much.
No, I don't think Ben
from
Affleck's
what I
a good
remember.
actor.
Oh, I don't. That's not why I didn't like it.
I mean, it
was
wasn't
like,
a great script either. I agree.
Yeah.
But Donald Petrie directed this film. He also directed Mystic Pizza, Grumpy Old Men, Richie Rich, the Macaulay Culkin movie from the 90s.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one.
That movie was so cute. And How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Oh, nice. I actually like that one from what I remember of it.
I usually skip over most of Matthew McConaughey's rom-coms. I like his drama performances much better.
Yeah.
So that is Miss Congeniality. It was released in the year 2000, on December 22nd of 2000, actually. It had a budget of $45 million, which is pretty good. I think that's right around what you would expect.
I would say that that's a solid budget for a movie like this.
It did great in the United States and worldwide because on a $45 million budget, it made $107 million in the US and $213 million worldwide.
Damn, that's really good.
So you'd think that this is a movie that just falls under the movies we want to reintroduce people to, the movies that we want to remind people exist. But this movie only has a 6.3 rating on IMDb.
Oh, wow.
So I would argue this movie's underrated.
I would have to agree.
Let us know if you think this movie is also underrated. You can watch it right now if you have a Netflix subscription.
That's how I watched it since I don't have a physical copy.
Yeah, we're going to have to change that soon.
Agreed.
All right, so that is my Sandra Bullock movie pick of the week. John, I'd like to propose to move over to your pick of the week.
Sounds good to me.
All righty, take it away.
I shall. Let's discuss this movie from the year 2009, 9 years later, after Miss Congeniality was released. This film stars Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds, Mary Steenburgen, Craig T. Nelson, Betty White, Malin Akerman, and a whole handful of other people. This movie is called The Proposal, which is another movie that I would have to say is slightly underrated. If we're going to discuss scores, which we never do, or I never do anyway, here on Movies You Miss podcast. On IMDb, mine has a 6.8 out of 10 and a Metascore of 48. So it really didn't do very well with critics or audiences, apparently, which kind of boggles my mind. Because the first time I saw this movie, I laughed my entire ass off, and I still do. It's a very entertaining flick.
It is a very entertaining flick, though I would argue it should not be rated higher than Miss Congeniality on IMDb. And that you're right. We normally don't talk about scores. We normally don't talk about critics because we really don't enjoy doing that at all.
Yeah.
But lately, with the comedies that we've been choosing, that's the first time I've really noticed how poorly they've been rated, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. But you're right. We don't normally talk about it. We don't try to, and I think that's a good rule to stick with, too.
Then we shall stick with it after this episode.
All right.
This film centers on Margaret Tate. She is an editor-in-chief at a very big publishing house in New York City. She is the most feared woman in the office, and we learn this very early on because right as she's walking in the office, DMs go out to actually not DMs, IMs, instant messages on AOL chat, if you remember what that is, that she is in the building. So everybody goes from their leisure morning and drinking their coffee, eating their donuts, to sitting up straight, typing away, and answering phone calls, even if there's nobody on the other end. We also are introduced to Andrew Paxton, played by Ryan Reynolds. We find out he is her assistant and has been for the last 3 years. He does just about everything for her, including getting her morning coffee. We also find out that Andrew wants to work his way up to editor as well. And Margaret just keeps telling him no. She just needs him as her assistant, and that's pretty much where he's going to remain for some time. Margaret is then summoned up to her boss's office to discuss the fact that the promotion that she wanted might have to be put on hold for a little bit because her visa has expired, and she is actually an immigrant from Canada, and she is about to be deported. What does Margaret do in her quick thinking? She tells her boss that Andrew and her have been engaged for the last couple of months. They didn't want to tell anybody. They wanted it to be a surprise because Andrew is in fact a U.S. citizen, and all she needs to do is, like any other green card marriage, get married to somebody in the United States, and she can stay in the country and continue working as editor-in-chief at this publishing house. Andrew's very reluctant about all of this, of course. After the abuses that he's been put through by Margaret, he decides that now the ball is in his court. Andrew does nothing else but say, I will go through with this if you make me editor at the end of this process and after this marriage. So what does Margaret do? She really has no choice but to agree with Andrew's terms. So Andrew also says that he's going to be going away for the next few days to go see his grandmother on her birthday. and Margaret decides that she's going to tag along. This is when we find out that Andrew is actually an Alaskan-born child and lives up in Alaska. Margaret, of course, has no idea about any of this because she never cared to learn anything about Andrew as her assistant, so it's a bit of a shock to Margaret.
My favorite line of the whole movie. I use it all the
Which
time.
one?
Alaska.
Yeah. So she ends up going to Alaska with Andrew to visit his family, and this is where we're introduced to Mary Steenburgen, Craig T. Nelson, and Betty White, who, of course, shines in this movie. Everybody is a lot of fun in this movie. Oscar Nunez is in this movie as well. I've had the pleasure of working with Oscar Nunez on an episode of NCIS LA, and Betty White actually has a great introduction to this movie while she first meets Margaret, so I'll let Betty White drop this one on us.
Well, hello there. Now, do you prefer being called Margaret or Satan's mistress? We've heard it both ways.
Oh, Betty White steals this movie.
Yes. And so for the rest of the movie, we are along for this ride while Margaret and Andrew go up to Alaska to celebrate Andrew's grandmother's birthday, learn about each other throughout the process of these next few days so that they can pass this evaluation from the Department of Immigration and go through with this wedding to keep Margaret in the U.S. I'm a big fan of this movie. I've seen it several times. I watched it for the first time on DVD with my parents. They rented it after they saw it in theaters and completely fell in love with it. They figured I would enjoy it, and they were right. I very much did. So, V, I'm curious. I don't know how many times you've seen this movie, but for the rewatch of this episode, what did you think? Did you have a good time with it?
I had a great time with it. I did not see this movie when it came out in theaters either. I waited until it was out on DVD. This came out back when I was in my 20s, so I think I got it on Netflix or something, and I really enjoyed it. It's still really entertaining. It's a lot of fun. All of the supporting characters are great. Craig T. Nelson plays an absolute asshole in this movie really, really well.
Very well.
Mary Steenburgen is a hero. I love her so much when she just goes off on him. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. She's a great mom.
Yes.
But, like we said, Betty White steals the show, even from Sandra Bullock, and I love every single line of hers so much. When she talks about the special blanket that's been in their family for years, I call it the baby maker.
Yeah.
She's awesome. And then when her and Sandra Bullock are out in the woods together, I don't care how many times
is hysterical.
I've seen that scene or even seen it on YouTube. I laugh every single time that scene shows up. To the windows, to the walls.
Yeah. Betty White, that whole thing is hysterical.
I love the proposal story between Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock trying to one-up each other because they really don't like each other at all.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's like, how did he propose? Oh, my God. That back and forth is, I think, one of the best parts of the movie. And there is actually a reference to one of my previous picks that you hate that I wonder if this time around watching The Proposal, you actually got that reference because... Dennis O'Hare, who plays the immigration agent, he plays the king of the vampires in True Blood.
Oh, does he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he also plays the doctor for Matthew McConaughey in the Dallas Buyers Club. He's a great actor. And so in this movie, he's the immigration agent. And at one point he says, "I'm like Elliot Ness. I always get my man." And that's a reference to The Untouchables that you hated.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten the Elliot Ness reference, or I always get my man. Nope, didn't get it.
Oh, even this time around, since you've watched The Untouchables now.
I have almost completely forgotten of the time I wasted watching The Untouchables, so I couldn't tell you any character's name
for the best,
except for Al Capone and Robert De Niro in that movie.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Beyond that, hated it. I love seeing Sandra Bullock as this character. She's usually the girl next door. That's what she was known for in the 90s, and she is a raging bitch in this movie.
Oh, yeah. She's terrible.
She's really, really good at being a horrible human being.
She is.
But I can confirm she's not one in real life, so she was acting in this film. Thank God. So, yes.
Definitely, thank God.
I really enjoyed my revisit of this movie. Thank you for picking it. I definitely think she hasn't really had a bad rom-com. She's always picked really good ones, and this is certainly one of them, and it goes right along with 2 Weeks' Notice, Hope Floats, The Lost City, which just came out recently.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong when you put Sandra Bullock in a rom-com.
I completely agree.
And I love the credits in this movie. Everyone, please stay and watch the credits.
Oh, absolutely. You have to. I never did see 2 Weeks' Notice, though, so I'm not sure if that's one I would enjoy, but I've heard good things about it.
It's a pretty fun rom-com. They have two characters who play her parents that are really great, and I think Heather Burns is in that movie, too.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, Miss Rhode Island.
All right, it is time to jump into the BTS for the proposal. Similarly to last week, there's not a whole lot that I could find, which is unfortunate, but it happens. I think my favorite piece of trivia that I found about this movie was that Betty White almost turned the movie down because filming was on location in Boston, even though it's supposed to be Alaska, but that just meant that she was going to have to spend 10 weeks away from her golden retriever.
God, I love her so much.
She was an animal lover.
She really was, but at least she got to play with an adorable puppy on this set.
That she did. That dog is very adorable. Reminds me of Falcor.
This movie was filmed in Boston?
Yes, it was. It was not filmed in Alaska.
Wow. That's actually really cool trivia to know.
I agree. I have never been to Boston. I've never been to Alaska. But you have been to Alaska.
And Boston.
Oh, well, cool. I didn't know that you had been to Boston. I just know about your Alaska trip and the new one that's coming up shortly.
That's true.
Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock were a little awkward shooting the one scene where, they're both naked with each other. And Sandra Bullock ultimately ended up thinking that it actually was going to work out very, very hilariously. And it really did. One of the reasons why they were so awkward about it was because in situations like this, when you're shooting a movie and there's nudity, even if the man is shot from the back, he's wearing something over his...
sock puppet.
Yes, he's wearing a sock puppet.
That's what I always called him on set.
And the women usually wear what's called a merkin, which is
I love
just
that word so much. It's so ridiculous.
Well, it kind of goes back to also Dr. Strangelove and how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb because it was President Merkin. So there's a little bit of hilariousness going on in there. But anyway, the sock that Ryan Reynolds had to wear and the merkin that Sandra Bullock had to wear continually would fall off while they would shoot this scene together. But they got over it. They were adults. They had a good time with it. And Sandra Bullock is quoted saying to Entertainment Tonight that the film needed her nudity to be funny. And it's fine.
The film needed Ryan Reynolds nude for comedy reasons too. I get behind that.
Oh, I'm sure it was all comedy reasons. Absolutely. Yes. I'm sure every woman's like, oh, it's so funny. Yeah. Similar to
It's
The Lost
necessary.
City where she has to take the leeches off.
Or similar to the Amityville Horror when Ryan Reynolds is, oh my God, topless in that movie too. He's really hot.
Yeah, he is topless. Yes, he is.
And Blade 3.
Okay.
I
well,
could keep going.
I guess this is becoming a Ryan Reynolds admiration
Thirst
of his chest.
podcast.
Yeah, let's moving on.
Okay.
Julia Roberts was offered the role of Margaret in this movie
Ooh.
originally.
Wow,
she
that'd be
turned
very,
it down.
That'd be very meta considering Julia Roberts is a bitch in real life.
Yeah, that's all I've heard, unfortunately. It sucks to hear, but it is what it is. She turned it down because she didn't want to take a pay cut to do the movie. This is also the second film that Julia Roberts turned down, but Sandra Bullock took over. And that was the first time that Sandra Bullock won her Oscar, and that was The Blind Side from back in also 2009.
Wow, I cannot picture Julia Roberts in that character from The Blind Side at all.
I've never seen The Blind Side, but I
don't watch it.
I don't. Okay, I won't. I could picture Julia Roberts in this movie, though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Sandra Bullock was also interviewed by the United Kingdom's GMTV. Now, GM, of course, Greenwich Mean TV, right? We all know of the GM. She was saying that the proposal was her biggest box office opening yet. And she joked about it because she was naked. And she said that every movie from here on out she had to be naked in. If you're naked and you're trying to be sexy, you don't really make as much money. And if you're naked and you're trying to be funny, well, there you go. That's pretty much what she said. I think a lot of female nudity can be funny. There's a Sex Tape with Cameron Diaz and Jason Segel.
Yes.
That movie's very entertaining.
And speaking of Jason Segel, forgetting Sarah Marshall, his nudity is played for laughs several times in that film, and it works.
That's true, yeah. We are, I guess you could use the word treated to Jason Segel and forgetting Sarah Marshall more than once.
Yes.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. There's a moment in this movie where an eagle and a dog meet, and that eagle was actually...
It's such a stupid scene, but it works so well.
It is. Yeah, it's very dumb. And it's definitely played for laughs. And that eagle's actually an Australian wedged-tailed eagle.
So did that have an animal handler then? Was that an actual eagle that they used for the scene that they coordinated? Oh, nice. I thought it was just...
animal handler on set with an eagle. Pretty sweet stuff.
Right on.
Now, granted, of course, there are a couple moments where it's definitely not an eagle and a dog, but for the initial wide shots and establishings of that sequence, yes, that was practically done, which we love practicality here.
Yeah, I thought that was just some B-roll they took from somewhere, so that's actually kind of cool to know.
That would have been pretty funny. One cool thing that I did find out was that Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds had been friends for years. They'd been friends for almost a decade before this movie went into production. So I can only imagine how much fun they actually had together making this movie.
Really? That's so cool. I had no idea. I bet that made the nudity scene a little bit easier then.
Oh, I can only imagine. And they really play off each other very well in this movie. The chemistry's there, and you can tell that they had a very good time making this movie, along with everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that they all stayed friends afterwards as well. There's the Screen Actors Guild Awards in 2010, and Sandra Bullock and Betty White were on stage together. And at one point, Betty White...
I remember that.
Oh, God, I love that so much. Betty White was a comedic genius because she said, "Oh, aren't you so happy that Sandra Bullock could be so successful for a girl as plain as she is? What a triumph." And it's just so brutal and awesome. And of course, Sandra thinks it's hilarious too, and so does the rest of the audience. God, it was just so fun afterwards to see them all making little clips and skits together. There's one point where it's Betty White's birthday and Ryan Reynolds is making a little video for her, and in the background she's just like cursing him out and being a total bitch. And it's just,
yes, I love that.
It's such a good skit too. Yeah, they all seem to be friends, and I think that's what really helped make this movie as fun and entertaining as it is.
I love hearing that kind of stuff too, especially with watching the BTS of Titanic a week and a half ago. Just seeing everybody have so much fun to make a movie and just do nothing but make each other laugh is just what making movies is all about. This film came out on June 19th of 2009. The budget for this movie, V, give it a shot. What do you think?
I'm going to guess $50 million.
You were off by $10 million. It was a $40 million budget.
Oh, okay.
Not bad, right?
No, not at all.
The opening weekend box office domestically was $33.6 million. The domestic overall box office, V, give that one a shot. What do you think?
I don't remember it being super successful. I'm going to guess $86 million.
You were off by a lot. It pulled in $163.9 million domestically.
Holy shit! I don't remember it being that successful at all.
I don't either. Gross worldwide. Give that one a shot, V.
God damn it. Okay. 200...
Hey, you wanted to guess these things.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad you started asking me again. I'm going to guess $260 million.
You were off by a lot. $317.3
million
dollars worldwide for The Proposal. I really hope that Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds, Betty White, and everybody involved got some sort of percentage for this movie.
Holy shit. I really don't remember it being that successful at all.
Same. No, I really don't.
I mean, good for everyone.
Yeah, and I love everybody in this movie. It just wasn't something that I gravitated to in 2009. Now, I've done the year 2009 before. I did Princess and the Frog. I did Fanboys. I also did Coraline and A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey. So we're not going to get too deep into the highest-grossing films of 2009. Needless to say, my film did pull in a lot of money in the year 2009.
Yeah.
The Proposal came in at number 13 of the highest-grossing films. And, oddly enough, number 10 was Sandra Bullock's Oscar-winning movie, The Blind Side. So she had 2 top 20 movies in the year 2009. So congrats to Sandra Bullock for that. So that is The Proposal, everybody. If you have not seen the film, it is currently streaming on Hulu. It's a great time, lots of laughs. Give it a shot. V, before we go, I'm curious. Would you watch Miss Congeniality with your grandmother?
Oh, yeah. I'd watch it with any of my grandmas. This is a great film, very family-friendly, no sex scenes, hardly any swearing, if at all. And I think anyone over the age of, 12 could watch it.
Oh, I completely agree with that one.
Nice. And would you watch The Proposal with your grandma?
I absolutely would.
Great.
So that is our Sandra Bullock episode here at Movies You Miss Podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. We are both big fans of these movies, and we will very likely be adding some more Sandra Bullock movies to our list for the future, but that is not what's going to happen next week. Next week, we are going to have some fun and get science fiction-y again. V, I'm curious what your pick for next week is going to be.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to this episode, especially because it's an episode where you will be introducing me to a movie I haven't seen before. Always look forward to that. And on my end, I picked a sci-fi movie from the 90s starring Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman, and Jude Law. This is 1997's Gattaca.
I have not seen this movie since I was in high school, so I'm very much looking forward to revisiting this one.
Ooh, I'm glad to hear that. But unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere. You'll have to rent it for $3.79 from any of the streaming services. And John, what sci-fi movie did you pick for next week?
Oh, I'm so excited about this movie. This movie is written by Alex Garland, who wrote my favorite horror film, 28 Days Later. We are also getting 28 Years Later this year in June. Can't wait for that. This film is also directed by the man, Danny Boyle. Talked about him a couple of times here with Trainspotting and 28 Days Later. And we will continually talk about Danny Boyle because his filmography is so fantastic. My film stars Cliff Curtis, Cillian Murphy, Michelle Yeoh, Rose Byrne, Benedict Wong, and Chris Evans in his crowning achievement as an actor. This film is Sunshine, everybody. Can't wait for you to see this movie. It is unfortunately, like yours, not streaming anywhere, but you can rent it on Amazon for $3.99. I will watch my DVD copy because there is no 4K copy yet. Super excited to go down this road with you next week, V. But before we do that, here at Movies You Miss Podcast, we would love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and follow us on all social media. We love to close out Movies You Miss Podcast with film is a form of art, and in art all opinions are valid, except if you think
Sandra Bullock isn't the queen of rom-coms.
All right. Yeah, I like that. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.